Right, it is 8 p.m. and we are here like we said we would be. And tonight we are discussing who is looking out for our artists. So, welcome to the Ryan Mercer Show with Richard Masso. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Richard.
Here we are. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Ryan Mercer Show with Richard Masso. And as I just said a few seconds ago, we're going to be discussing musicians and their mental health. And this is pretty much started up by a comment that my 15-year-old daughter made to me. And then also the recent passing of DMX, who died of a catastrophic heart attack that was apparently caused by an overdose. So just to bring you up to speed on how we got here, my daughter and I, Alexis, she's 50 years old. We had the privilege of seeing Linkin Park in concert 5 or 6 years ago now, and it was amazing. Okay, so I've seen Linkin Park quite a few times before that, but I saw it with my daughter, and she's been in love with the music ever since. So at the age of 15, she has a pretty good understanding of the world. She doesn't know everything. She is a teenager. She thinks that she knows everything. But we were listening to Linkin Park, and she said to me, I'm listening to the lyrics, and nobody could tell that he was in pain, right? So here we are. I have a few people helping me on this topic tonight. We have Richard, as always. We have my cousin Sean, who's going to be our musical expert.
Hello.
We have John Anthony, who some of you know from checking in with John Anthony for teenagers, toddlers, and twins. He is an emotional counselor with the Supportive Alliance. Say hi, John.
Hi, Ryan. Hi, Richard, John.
Hi.
And then I brought my mother in for this one also. If you know my mother, she's been a family therapist for over 40 years. So she's a mental health expert, and she has seen quite a bit. So, yeah, here we are, and we're going to discuss who is looking out for our artists. Because, I mean, before Alexis said it to me, and we were just saying it when we were doing our prep, I didn't even really think about it in that way. And since she said it, it's just completely changed my outlook on the entire thing. And, you know, I texted Richard and I said, I think that we should do a podcast on this because I don't think it's any news that's an issue that plagues musicians, actors, you know, artists of all sorts. But we're going to focus on the topic of music. So I gave my little input about how I feel about the situation and what's going on. So I'm also going to kick it to Richard, and then we're going to do a little bit of a round robin here and you know, get everybody's feelings and thoughts before we go into deeper discussion. So Richard, what's your take on you know, musicians and mental health and substance abuse and where it's at?
Sure. So, and I was telling Ryan this off the air, I'm definitely going to defer to our other guests a lot more because this is not my area of expertise. So I'm very much coming at this from a total like fan perspective. And the reason I jumped all over this topic was actually related to, if anyone's paid attention, Britney Spears has had a documentary come out about her. And one of those things where it showed a lot of how she was manipulated as a child and how her career was directed and affected by people. And while she hasn't really suffered too much from some of the substance abuse issues we'll talk about with other artists, she's definitely had the mental health breakdown. And she's often villainized. I really feel like she's often villainized. And that's kind of what I found myself in a discussion / argument with someone because they were like, oh, who cares about her? Like, oh, boo-hoo, Cry Me a River, which we'll talk about Justin Bieber later. There's a bunch of people here where we tend to go, like, who cares about them? And then again, you couldn't read a post on Facebook about DMX this week without somebody mentioning, well, he chose that lifestyle. He chose to party. And I was like, this is perfect. Let's have a discussion about why our sympathy disappears sometimes for our, you know, and again, we could easily have this break out into all kinds of celebrities, but we're going to focus on musicians because with Ryan's story, they're the poets. They have these words where sometimes they're screaming out in their lyrics that they need help. So, so I'm curious to see what everyone thinks and looking forward to hearing the discussion tonight.
Awesome. So Sean, I'll bring you up next. So for those of you that don't know, my cousin Sean is, you know, there's some people that like music. There's some people that love music. Sean lives music. So Sean, you've been, you know, following the bands inside and out. You have their home addresses. You send them Christmas cards, you know, during the holidays and stuff. What is your take on the mental health addiction crisis that has pretty much plagued musicians for decades?
I agree with Richard a lot. A lot of these people are villainized and looked at as bad people. DMX, I actually just had a conversation with a coworker today about DMX, and kind of the same thing as the Britney Spears thing. Like, who cares about him? He did it to himself, and this, that, and the other thing. But you don't really know what's going on behind closed doors. As a person myself who has, dealt with mental illness and dealt with addiction issues in my life, and been around it my whole life, it's really, it's sad because, just because somebody's going through something and they end up a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that you can't still like the person that they are, the person that they may have been, the person that you think they are. I'm sure Chester Bennington and all those people were, like your daughter said, they were hurt people and crying out, and people don't even realize it. Growing up in the punk rock and hardcore metal music scene, underground music scene that I grew up in, there's been a lot of death, a lot of suicide, a lot of drug overdoses. A lot of my favorite bands lost, best friends, family members due to it. And it's sad, and it doesn't make me like those people any less or stop listening to their music. Just because you're hurting yourself, it doesn't mean you're not hurting other people, but it is your life. It is your body. It is your choice. It is, I could go on for forever about it. There's so many different takes on it.
No, I completely agree with you. And what Richard and Sean are saying, and I'm sure we'll continue to say it throughout the night. Before I ask John and my mom what they think on the subject, villainized people. I also think, I want to be fair also. I think that there's also just a huge misunderstanding. I think that maybe all of us can agree that over the last couple of years, mental health is now being addressed in a much bigger light, right? We're taking it much more seriously. People are taking their own mental health much more seriously. We're checking on people more. The pandemic has led to mental health issues, but going back to what everybody said, villainize. I can think about growing up, and it's like, oh, how did he die? Overdose, right? And there's the lack of compassion just right there. It's like overdose. They're a musician. They had money. Their family's going to be fine because they had money. Who cares? Let's move on. We'll keep listening to the music. Yada yada yada. So. Just wanted to give that input real quick. And now I'm going to kick it to my mom, the therapist, real quick. Mom, what's your take on the situation? No disrespect. I love you with all my heart. But just a quick rundown, not a dissertation. We'll get to all your thoughts later on in the show.
Well, it's hard to not do a dissertation on this. So I hope we'll get to talk about it. The question is, who's responsible? So as to Richard's point, there's the musicians who are older, and then the ones that came into it very, very young. And it really lends itself to the question of who's responsible. So people scream and yell, the addict, the mental health patient, they're responsible. But are they when they come into it as a young child? Are the parents responsible? What about the responsibility for these agents? What do they care about? They care about money. So I hope we'll get to talk about it. Really is a question about collective responsibility. And as long as we scream and yell and point fingers and say this one's responsible, that's one's responsible, we won't get anywhere. We have to have a more unified approach to help kids. And I think with the advent of the internet and YouTube, we have young kids who are stars in a minute, who went from abject poverty to stardom in 0.3 seconds. Mentally, nobody can handle that. So we have to talk about some safeguards to put in. And I love Richard's point about, Richard, there's a lot of studies that when you have wealth, you lose your sensitivity to the person's problem.
I got a stimulus check a couple of weeks ago that, you would have thought I was a millionaire when I got my $1,400. Right. And I didn't say, oh, I'm going to put 1,000 of this away and 200 of this away. I was like, oh, you know what? We can go out to dinner tonight. Yeah, we can do this, And again, so times that by $1 million plus I'm on the cover of every magazine. I can't fathom how it would go.
And in a minute, and with no steps, not like in the old days. So that's my take on it. I want to talk about who's responsible.
Okay, excellent. John, you're last up. What's your take on the matter, or the subject, I should say, also?
Well, I think musicians are one category. A lot of millions of people have access to them. You have movie stars. It's another category. But really, they are still a part of the human race. And in my experience, this is anecdotal, a lot of us don't know how to deal with our emotions in a healthy way. It seems like we get taught how to deal with our emotions with the mindset when we're a child. You know, we're kind of left to our own, and we kind of have to learn to, you know, either get angry or to numb out or distract ourselves, you know, or resort to addictions because we don't know what to do with that emotional pain. And oftentimes, you know, my parents didn't know what to do with their emotional pain, so they weren't able to teach me. And so then we go through life, and you know, when you have a lot of attention and you have a lot of money, you know, like some of the artists do, things come real fast, and sometimes they come faster than they're able to handle because they are not fully mature yet. You know, they're teenagers. You know, and so I think that it's a really a big problem for the world, and the sooner that we can start taking responsibility for teaching our children how to work through and process emotions in a healthy manner, kind of like, you know, we're supposed to do with sex, you know, to talk about the birds and the bees, but yet a lot of parents don't talk about the birds and the bees with their kids because it's like, well, I'm not going to say anything if they don't say anything. And then the kid kind of grows up learning on its own. And so I think that there's a parallel problem there, but it's just about how we deal with our emotions. And then it ends up getting acted out. And, you know, the things that we see musicians or movie stars go through, but really, you know, everybody is going through those things to various degrees.
Yeah, and you know what? You actually just made me think about something, and I believe I said it on the last podcast that you and I did together, John, is, you know, we as adults lately, and, you know, I don't know if this has been going on since the beginning of time, but I know that as I get older now here in my early 30s, I myself say you're not fully matured, or I'm not fully matured until, you know, my mid 20s, my early 30s even. I feel like I'm really just starting to get things about life now. And, you know, Sean was saying this, you know, speaking about mental health, because that ends up, you know, blocking everything. I had heard once that people with addiction who are battling addiction, severe addictions, mentally don't grow. Like, that's a gap. So if you were addicted to heroin for 10 years, that's a gap. So when you're finally cleaned up, if you started using when you're 20 and now you're 30, a year later you're 21 mentally. I've heard that things like that. So, you know, when you think about it, I would say that a number of our musicians start their careers like early 20s, late 20s. Would you say, Sean?
Depends on the genre of music, but yeah, I mean, late teens, early 20s.
And you're still growing up, right? They're still growing up.
I was a maniac in my late teens, early 20s. I mean, you know, as most of us were. I mean, I'm 40 now, and I'm, like I said, I said off air, I was talking to you guys before, I just started calming down the past few years. Mm-hmm. And you know what I mean? And it's still a daily grind and a battle, you know, right. But as a lot of people can relate to, but it's not, I couldn't imagine being in the limelight, because I grew up and I lived a lifestyle. Me and my wife, Melissa, just watched, I don't know if anybody out there that's listening or anybody here has watched the 90s documentary that Soleil Moon Frye, Punky Brewster, did on Netflix. She was friends with a lot of these actors and musicians, and she documented everything in the late 80s and early 90s. Amazing documentary, but it's about all of this. And I literally lived a lifestyle like hers, and I couldn't imagine if I had the money and the fame and the notoriety that they had, if I'd be sitting on this call talking to you guys at 40, you know. Right. And so it all ties back together. It's such a hard lifestyle when these kids start out as musicians, and they are not grown up. They are still just mentally undeveloped. And at that age, and Ryan, you know, you can conquer the world. You feel like you can conquer the world. Nobody can hurt you. Nobody can touch you. Completely invincible. Completely invincible.
And to what Sean just said, and I want to use what Richard said as well to ask my mom real quick. So, Mom, real quick, we're talking about starting in, you know, acting or music at an early age. right? So instantly we think Britney Spears and what she's going through, what she's been through. Remember, she shaved her head and, got a little upset and crazy there for a little bit. And I remember my dad saying she's going to have a comeback, which she did, right? Because people love that shit. People love when people start freaking out and stuff like that. But it's not a joke, right? As we continue to see Britney get older, no disrespect to Britney Spears. Sometimes I don't follow her, but I've talked to my wife who follows Britney, huge Britney Spears fan. Sometimes Britney does things on Instagram or social media, and you're kind of like, you know what I mean? But so, Mom, Britney Spears has been in acting since a very young age. Music was later on, I believe. Now you're touring. Now you have money. Now your parents have money. Your parents like the money because it helps them out. They want you to continue to be successful. You're going through emotions that a teenager goes through. You're going through emotions that a 20-something person goes through. You may think to yourself, you know what? I want to stop doing this for a year or so. I want to see what's going on. But then, like you said, you have agents in your ear. You have your family in your ear. You have your friends in your ear saying, well, if you step away, you might not be relevant when you come back. So, like, how much of how much does that hurt somebody's emotional well-being when, whether it's the agent or the parents or their friends, forcing that person to stay in the spotlight for they think they have their best interest at hand, but really they might just have their best interest at hand. So what kind of effect does that have?
It depends on what their belief system is, what they were coming into it. If they buy into the belief system that they're above everything, they don't need things that everybody else needs, then it's going to be a disaster. That's what I think happens with a lot of the celebrities. And we see it all the time. They're above everything, right? They're above the law. They're above paying taxes. They're not going to get hooked on the drugs. These drugs are not going to hurt them. They need to have a sound belief system that levels them with reality. And it was John or someone said, it doesn't matter. The same things are going to happen in life to you, whether you're a celebrity or not, right? You're going to live, you're going to die, you're going to age. And we have to help them accept that. But as to your point about what happens, they can get stunted, like you were saying, with drugs. How can they have a normal emotional system? How can anything be normal? You'll see, Ryan, if people start to know you on the podcast, you'll see it at a small level and they recognize you. I think sometimes, I don't know if this happens with you, John. So I can't really go out in the community without at least one person knowing me. And I always think about the stars. I say, one person knows me. Oh, Dr. Feinstein. It happened when Ryan was little. Dr. Feinstein saved my life. Ryan didn't want to hear that. He just wanted to be at the mall shopping for what he wanted. And so I think in my head, I multiply that by 1,000 people coming at you, asking for an autograph, asking for this or that. The pressure's enormous.
Right. And
so how can you develop normally? So one, your belief system that you're above everything else. They need mental health right from the beginning to say it's not that way. You're still a human being. Secondly, that pressure all the time to be on. It's just, I think, horrific for any emotional development. And then who are they going to relate to? How are they going to have any normal development? Is Britney Spears friends with any regular people outside of Hollywood? You ever notice they marry each other, don't they?
That's true. That's true.
How many times did you see one marry somebody? You guys are better with the names than I am. Who's somebody who married outside the field?
The only people that usually do are athletes. They marry other athletes a lot, but sometimes they marry a college sweetheart, high school sweethearts. But as far as rock stars and celebrities, they marry each other generally.
That's actually interesting. I didn't think about that till Sean just said that right there. So
yeah, they marry each other.
You ever see an athlete marry somebody who looks like a regular woman, just a normal everyday woman?
Moving on,
not generally.
So moving on to more of the mental health aspect of things when it comes to musicians and stuff like that. I'm going to defer to John. John, I'm a musician. My dad and mom wanted me to stay in the spotlight. All right. I wanted to go off and cheerlead. I wanted to go off and play football. I wanted to go off and be normal. But you know what? My dad and mom said, this is what you want to do. You're going to be set for life. You're going to have tons of money. You won't have to worry about anything. This is what you want to do. And I believe it. So now I get further in my career and I begin to resent my parents. I begin to completely regret this decision that I made. I have all the money in the world, but I'm not happy. My life has passed me by because I was touring. I didn't get to do what I want to do. Now I'm angry at everybody. All right. So now I can't be in a room with the lights off and the TV off without thinking about how my life has passed me by and I'm upset about everything. And I need to find a way to get rid of this emotions, how to deal with this. Well, I'll write a song. Right, I'll write a song. And is that how we want to deal with things? Like how do the past wounds affect our artists in the situation when really life in some cases never got the chance to slow down?
Well, I think that dynamic that you just spoke about happens to so-called ordinary people, people that want their children to be engineers, like my dad wanted me to be an engineer, or doctors, or they want you to follow in their profession. In their business, and when the child isn't given the opportunity to pick its own path, it's going to be easy for the child to resent because they've been maybe trained to obey their parent, and they do what their parent asks them to do. But that's part of the growing up process. I thought I was my own person when I was in high school. And then when I went away to college, that's when I found out that I was just, doing things that were in the circle that my parents had outlined for me that were going to be okay. I wasn't really my own person when I was in high school, like I thought I was. But see, there's another factor that plays in for them, just like it does for all of us. We all grow up wanting love in our life. And when we're children, we learned to get love from other people. And when we grow up in a family, then we get that love from our family. But when you are a star, a movie star or a musician, where you're performing in front of millions of people, you're getting that love from millions of people. And, when a baby is born, it's 100% dependent on its parents. Ideally, which it's very rarely, by the time you're 18, the parent has taught you how to be completely dependent upon yourself, so you're independent, and then you go off into the adult world and you learn how to give that "Are you a cat?" that I'm always talking about, the respect, understanding, acceptance, caring, appreciation, and trust to yourself. Well, when you are getting the adoration of all these people, it's like a drug. You're getting love, and it's like, oh, they love me. They love me. But they only love me for as much as my last song, because if I don't create another song, I'm going to lose that. Or if I don't create another movie, I'm going to lose that. So they become really dependent on trying to get love from other people. And when we all, whether it's for large amounts of people or just in our small circles, when we're trying to focus only on getting love from other people, we don't exercise our own "Are you a cat?" muscle to where we learn how to give that love to ourselves. So I think in some ways, someone who's a star is maybe even more handicapped in that way because they become so dependent on that adulation, or in today's terms, how many Facebook hits, how many likes did you get?
Right.
And things like that, did you go virtual? And so I think that this is what is a factor that plays into it, and it affects us emotionally. And we're not really addressing emotions. We let people just kind of deal with themselves, and because a lot of us don't know what to do with our pain. So we're not going to be able to tell somebody else what to do. So the things that we learned as a child that are unhealthy, we teach other people because we don't know any better.
Right. So I had a question kind of around circling around what you just said about, hits as far as, social media, the fans always being there. It's 24/7. You're on the road. You have thousands of people in front of you. Mom, I'm sure you've worked with people, police officers, firefighters, people who are in the military who admit that they enjoyed the adrenaline. They enjoyed the rush. And what's it like when it stops? What is it? I have read that, sometimes people they don't know what to do with themselves because the rush has stopped. So what if somebody, stops for a minute, stops for a month, they don't tour for a year, they try to handle business, but they find out that they can't even function as a normal person, right? Maybe some PTSD. What goes on in situations like that?
They're difficult situations for the family because you're really asking what's the reentry to the family. So whether it's somebody who works, it can be anybody who works a lot of hours, people who travel away from home. As to musicians, I don't have a Hollywood practice, but I have been able to give treatment to some quote unquote famous people. And the problem is the reentry back into the family. That's a huge part. So let's say a rock singer who was on the road for 3 months, 4 months at a time. This is nothing to them. Now they're back. What do you think their partner says? Are you kidding me? I don't need you here. I don't need you there. So now they're cut off from the adrenaline of their job. They're displaced in the family. What do you think happens? You get a rapid depression.
Because it's a quick spiral, right? Downward.
It's a quick spiral because it's what I said before. It's what John was saying. Real life. What's real life when you have these jobs? What's real life? And I say, oh, you got to get friends with real life. But real life is very boring to them. So I think it's a two-part. It's one, what do they have inside them internally to help them? And two, that reentry back into family life, because all the resentment from when they weren't there, or it happens with physicians, surgeons, people who work all these hours, and it's not an easy fit back into family life. It's rocky.
Right. And
you can definitely attest to that yourself, and I can attest to that too. The past 10 years, I've been working in the automotive industry insane hours, and we're so up and down. The last day of the month, when we hit records and we hit goals and we achieve things, the adrenaline's going crazy. The next day we go in and we're absolutely nothing again. We joke around every first of the month and go, oh, we're zero. We were a hero yesterday. We're zero today. It's the same idea with a normal person like myself. And when I come home, my mood dictates everything. I couldn't imagine being out on the road, king of the world for 6 months at a time, and then trying to come home to a family.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on what you're saying. Again, I'm not a rock star. I don't live that type of lifestyle. I haven't, so I have no idea what it's like exactly, right? I can just picture it. But, when I was in New York, I was the senior manager of F&B. I'm getting ready for New Year's Eve. I'm getting ready for Christmas. I'm getting ready for Thanksgiving. The craziest couple months of my life, my career. Just pure adrenaline, going to sleep at 1 a.m. at home, getting back up again at 4 to go back to work. When I left for paternity leave for like a week, I went to go touch my cell phone, my work cell phone that I wasn't carrying, right? I was kind of like this the whole time. I was like, I have emails to check, right? It's like, no, you're not at work. It's like, well, what's going on at the hotel? And again, the two careers don't even compare, but I can't even imagine what the shell shock or PTSD is like for somebody who's like going around the world, plane to plane, bus to bus, signing autographs. You got an interview. In reality, you probably don't have any control over your own life, right? Maybe not even your bank account. You're just going where people tell you to go, and you're lost. Like you guys, it was a great series. I don't think it's on anymore. VH1 Behind the Music. They say all the time, I don't know what city I'm in anymore. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I just kind of like go where I'm told. And I can't imagine that that's a life that everybody can handle, right?
And Ryan, Behind the Music is I was thinking you can't watch a movie about a music star without seeing this. But Behind the Music, there is no Behind the Music about any celebrity they've ever done that didn't involve. Yeah, so I took Coke to get up for the interviews. I took a downers so I could crash at night, and then we were on a bus and we had to get from one place to the next, and we drank, and then. It's the challenge. I guess that could have been our contest today. Find the musician that didn't have some issue at some point in their career, and then that's what you see in every one of these Behind the Music's. Like, do we want to go back out on tour after we broke up? Because, and then they don't do the big world tour. They do the county fairs, or they do the smaller things. So that's that's what Brittany was trying. She was trying that Vegas, like where she was just in Vegas, and there wasn't it wasn't. That I can't fathom. I do comic book shows where all right, late Sunday night, I'm getting in, and then Monday I have to go to work, and I'm acting like it's the end of the world. I can't fathom, these, because again, even if it was just getting up and performing at a show each night, but when you get to a new city, you're doing you're on that morning news for that city. You're doing radio to call in.
I'm going to take it down to a different level. So everything you just said is dead on. But so I mentioned in the beginning, I listened to a lot of underground music I grew up listening to. I listen to a lot of bigger bands and people that have all the amenities and luxuries and buses and everything. But a lot of the bands that have been into my whole life, and still these days they're in their 50s, they tour around in vans. They tour around in packing all their equipment. They load in, load out themselves. And, they sleep at Red Roof Inns, not, the Hiltons and the, the 5, 4 and 5 star hotels and everything around the world. And these guys are brutal drug addicts, brutal alcoholics, and they have the same fever and the same excitement and the same adrenaline for performing and everything. But imagine when that's over. And I mean, some of these bands have been around 20, 30, some of them 40 years. One of my favorite bands have been around since 1979 right now. Imagine that lifestyle. I mean, they're touring around crammed in a little van with each other. Yeah, they have tour managers, they have business managers, they have people in the industry. But I mean, think about some of the people, that type of lifestyle that they're living. They're on the road sometimes 7, 8, 9 months out of the year. They have families, they have kids. It's like a whole different take on it, because we could talk about the huge rock stars all the time. These guys have to play shows, like what's happened with COVID the last year. All these concerts and everything were canceled. These guys can't go out and play shows. They don't really make money off of record sales anymore. They don't make money off of streams. They make money off of selling merchandise. They make money off of performing live in the venues, paying them. Look how many venues have went out of business in the past year because of what's happened and everything. So, I mean, that's been a whole other take on this that's been happening and been profiled on Facebook and Instagram with a lot of bands that I listen to, and a lot of different, podcasts and things that I listen to of people in that scene, in that music scene. It's just, it's a whole other like world out there that people don't even realize how some of those guys live. And they're rock stars to me. They're not a Chester Bennington. They're not a Britney Spears. They're not, but they're rock stars to me, and hundreds of thousands of other people all over the world.
Mom, what Sean just said, and I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I'm not trying to get anybody all upset. I just, I have a question. So, and then Sean or anybody, if you have a little bit more knowledge than I do, please speak to it. Mom, Chris Cornell took his own life May 18th, 2017. Chester Bennington, a very close friend of Chris Cornell, who was very upset when he took his own life, was also battling his inner demons. And Mom, I don't know if you know, but we're talking Chester is the lead singer of Linkin Park. Took his own life July 20th, 2007. So same year, not even, like a full 2 months after. When two people are depressed like that, like what's going on in their head? Did Chester feel like and again, like to anybody's listening, we don't know, none of us know Chester, but I'm asking the therapist kind of like what is the mindset that can take place when it's so close, two people battling depression, battling their inner demons. The one who is equally as depressed, if not more depressed, sees that, their close friend took their own life, and now here they are a couple months later, and it's like, I can't do this anymore either. Well,
it's the most misunderstood thing, and I hope you have this podcast listened to by many people. So people think that when somebody gets to suicidal ideation and thoughts, that they want to end their life. Wrong. Anybody listening, that's not what they want to do. They want to end their pain. And we need to understand that. I'm going to say it again. Suicidal people do not want to end their life. They feel that everything they've tried to end pain, it's not worked. And we need to wake up and hear what I'm saying. They don't see any way. It's like a terminal illness. They see no way to end that pain. So we have to be more alert to that. We have to understand. We have to be more open as a society. I don't know. I guess you're young. You're following in mental health, they're seeing that some of the psychedelic drugs are being used experimentally for resistant depressions. We have to get off of our prejudice. We have to say, let's really get some answers to these resistant depressions and realize it's not about giving up on life. It's about, I can't see any way for my head to stop with these negative thoughts.
Right. And the one thing I'm thinking, and then I'm going to kick it to John because he is a group therapist. That's mainly what he does. So I guess that's one example that stands out to anybody who's a fan of music is Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington and how close it was and how close they were. But I think that if you're a musician who is worked to the bone and you're kind of just trying to figure things out for your own, when something like that happens, and I don't have anything in front of me right now, but there's stars who are musicians who are thinking to themselves like, and again, I'm just speaking, they're thinking maybe that could have been me, right? Or Chris and we had a lot in common. Chris lived the same lifestyle I did, or Chester did, right? So is there like a pause that takes place? Like, are people like, what's going through their heads? And John, I'm going to ask you because I'm not sure, or I'm thinking maybe that you've had a group and somebody in the group close to them took their own life, and then suddenly they're kind of stuck thinking about what's going on in their life. Have you experienced that?
Sure. I've had people that, have come to me who's, have family members that have taken their life. And, but like Dr. Mom said, it's not that people want to end their life. They want to end their pain, but coming from a spiritual perspective, there's a book that I ran across years ago called A Course in Miracles. And what they teach is that everything that a person does is either an act of love or a call for love. So either I'm doing loving things for myself and other people, or I'm trying to get love. I'm calling for that love from other people. And what they said is suicide is the ultimate call for love from others. The problem is when you're successful, they don't get to feel that love that they were trying to call for. And when we bring that love to our emotional pain, that's what alleviates our fears and our disappointments and our shames. And when we can heal those emotional wounds, part of that process is to learn how to bring love into your life from yourself to yourself. And so when you tie that into movie stars or musicians or athletes, they have spent a long time trying to get that love from other people. And they, as I alluded to earlier, their own are you a cat muscle to give that love to themselves is very weak. And then when it looks like that source from other people is drying up, then they're in their darkness of their fear, and then we do desperate things when we're in our fear. And and if we haven't learned how to be able to be there for ourselves, and we're so dependent on others, that can be very scary for a lot of people. The athlete that's over the hill, or the musician that just isn't, getting the recognition that they used to, or the actor or actress that is too old to get any good parts. And it's a tough transition to live through. A person who's been in an auto accident and can no longer perform their job. They have to create a new career, a new way of living. And this is devastating for a lot of people because we identify with our careers and we don't see that we're more than just what our career is.
Right. And, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying because, and it goes back to what my mom has said here and you have said as well. And I think a couple of us have touched on it. I think we've all heard it. If like going back to VH1 Behind the Music, when, it's like, what happens when the music stops, right? And like you just said, it's like, I'm not relevant anymore. The fans are not here. I'm not being asked to do interviews, right? And it's like, what do I do now? So, Mom, I want to ask you about something or state something and then ask you. I did some research prior to the podcast, and I found a list of 30 celebrities. Unfortunately, there's much, much more. 30 celebrities who took their own lives. And every caption that I read, just about every caption, I'm not even kidding here, out of all 30 of them, friends and family said they struggled with mental illness for years. Okay? Now, I don't want to get controversial. I don't want to get everybody hyped up, but that's troubling to me. That's troubling to me. So that goes back to what I said earlier about, friends or family like pushing them like, yeah, you're a rock star, man, or you're a rock star girl, like keep going. And then at the end, when everything's said and done, it's they struggled with mental illness for a long time. And I'm just like, and that comes back to, the what I kept posting over social media the last few days, like who is looking out for these artists? So what's your take on that?
That's a huge question.
Real quick, I'm sorry. And is it hard for people to address it? Can it be very scary to say like, hey man, you need some help? Like we gotta find you some help.
So, and I'm going to need John's help on this. I mean, that's a question about, there's so many pieces to that question. Is the mental health system work? Do we have the answers for depression? Did they have access to it? Should we be providing some preventative things for people in, not like we said before, not just this occupation, but any occupation that taxes you to the max? And you're also asking when that dirty word money is involved. What happens when money is involved? If you go back and look at some of those cases, I'm going to bet, here's the lawyer. Let me just switch hats for a minute, because there's been some lawsuits lately, proliferation of lawsuits by the parents against the agents. It's, was he a rapper? Help me out, Sean. Little Peep?
Little Nas X.
Yes, yeah. And the mom filed the lawsuit, and it started all this ruckus about, like Ryan's saying, well, why'd she file a lawsuit? She knew he had issues. Why didn't she take him? The agent put a lot of pressure the night before he overdosed. He said,
no, that
I
wasn't
don't feel well. I don't feel well.
Different
I want to cancel the show. And the agent said, you can't do it because we'll lose what? What will we lose? Tons of what?
Lose money.
We'll lose tons of money. So that's such a big question, because one, is the mental health system in general sufficient to help people? Two, what happens when money's involved? Three, what John said, that, the parents lose sight of the values. I think they do push the kids to do some things because money is involved.
But what about the adults? What happened? Because a lot of these people were grown. What tends to happen in the adult situation? Is it, like you said, like maybe, let me just say also, I can't imagine that your life is normal, right? For the most part, if you're a musician, you've been out on the road for years, maybe, your wife or significant other was talking to somebody, you find out that maybe an affair, I'm just, thinking about things. Your kids, you miss them growing up, and like, it's like, when you stop and think, it's like, and then it's like, okay, but what are the people around you doing to help you? Is it, what's going on there?
They're not doing what they need to do. Also, in your question, who's attracted to these jobs? A lot of people have talent, but they wouldn't have that life for anything. I've treated some models, people who made tons of money and then quit. They quit because they didn't want to be anorectic. They didn't want to be a poor role model for kids. So you have to say it's kind of a loop of the question of who's attracted to those jobs, who would have those jobs. I've been friends with people from other cultures, and they say, you Americans, look who you idolize. You idolize somebody because they have good vocal cords. Why don't you idolize somebody who's finding a cure for cancer? So I do hear that from other cultures, right? And so who's attracted to those jobs? You're asking, how do you remain balanced? How do you have any mental health balance? Do they use that adrenaline rush to avoid seeking treatment? I think that's part of it. And I do think that absolutely everybody pushes them. The pressure to perform is superior to the caring about their life and good mental health.
I think a lot of it boils.
I think Ryan was alluding to copycat syndrome, John, when he was asking us. And of course, you couldn't be in mental health and not know the story about Lincoln Park, because so many of the kids I treat were devastated. And so we always worry about that copycat. And I get angry at some of these celebrities. Don't they have some obligation to get the care? They're role models. the kids, help me out, guys. The Lincoln
Well, no,
Park.
I want to say to what you just said, and I'm sorry, Sean, I know you want to say something, but to exactly what you just said, okay, let me just bring this up real quick. So if you've been listening to the news or you've been paying attention to anything, pop culture the last couple of years, the Kardashians, Kanye West, now people have a lot to say about Kanye West, but Kanye West is very open about his mental health struggles. Kim Kardashian and him, they are getting a divorce, but check this out real quick. I found this. So Kim Kardashian West addresses husband Kanye West's mental health. Okay. And it goes on to say Kim Kardashian West has publicly addressed her husband Kanye's mental health issues following a series of erratic statements in recent days. And she wrote on Instagram, as many of you know, Kanye has bipolar disorder. So she also goes on to say anyone who has this or has a loved one in their life who does knows how incredibly complicated and painful it is to understand. He is a brilliant but complicated person whose words sometimes do not align with his intentions, she said. All right, so I'm going to bring that down real quick. So I don't know, Mom, if you got to watch the interview between Kanye West and David Letterman. And I don't know if Sean or John or Richard or you got to do it. But, Kanye says when somebody sprains their ankle, you don't push them. When somebody sprains their ankle, their brain, their mental health, people do everything wrong. They push them. You got to go to therapy. You got to take prescription pills. You got to do this and that. So you're the professional here. I don't want to argue with your career or your knowledge or anything like that. But, we're saying it's on them. It's on them. It's on them. And, I think Sean and I can speak to this as well about mental health. You can tell me it's on me as much as you want. But until I'm ready to deal with it or until I hit rock bottom, I'm not going to deal with it. So I don't always think that it's fair for people to say, well, you got to deal with it. You got to figure it out. You do have to guide them in some sort of way is my opinion on it. And as somebody who has faced these challenges. And that's what I'm saying. Like, are people saying, and again, none of us know, we're not there for these conversations, are the people around them saying, just get help? And it's like, it's not that easy. I'm trying to express to you what's going on. It's not that easy. You're just telling me to get help. And everybody's just telling me to get help. Like, it's so simple, and it's not. And one more thing before I know Sean's ready to go on this. I also read that, let's face it, if you're a musician, okay, you're brilliant. And you're brilliant in one way or another. I have read, and Mom and John, I'm sure you can attest to this, brilliant people suffer from depression because they have the ability to create so many outcomes in their brain. Right. And this goes to John talking about negative fantasies and things of that nature. So I can't even imagine what it's like when you're that brilliant and you've seen the world and you've seen people and situations and all that starts to build up as potential could be's or maybes. And suddenly it's just you're like, I need all of this to stop. Right. So yeah. OK, so I got all that out. So Sean, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. No, a couple things. I mean, yeah, I definitely can experience. I like I said earlier, I've had mental health issues my whole life, still do, and I can relate as much as I don't want to relate with anything that Kim Kardashian says. I do relate with what she said about Kanye and his disorder, and it is. You do say and do things when you're in certain states of mind that you don't mean. But going back to musicians and all this stuff, you said, "What do you do when the music stops?" earlier. What do you do when the music stops? Is you face the real world, and the real world is scary, and the real world can suck, and the real world can be tough, and the real world can be cruel and mean and hurt. I don't care if you're me, you, a doctor, a lawyer, or a musician. It doesn't matter. The real world's tough, and it's really tough for these people to adapt. It's tough to adapt as a normal person in this society and in this world, this country, another country. It doesn't really matter where. It's just tough to adapt, and we do idolize everything, and we could go off social media, the whole thing. I mean, it's very tough. The other part of it is, we've talked about people around these people and telling them to go get help. Yeah, I'm sure they have some people to tell them to get help. The problem with a lot of these musicians and celebrities and famous people is they don't have good insulation systems. Like, they're not insulated by good people. And if they were good people while they were coming up or getting famous, when they are famous, they're now not good people because they're their cash cow. That's all they care about. They might not want the party to stop, and nobody realizes, I'm trying to help you, Ryan. but really I need help, but I'm pushing you to keep going because you're the star and I'm tagging along to you, but nobody even sits here and realizes I need help. You know what I mean? And I might be your friend, brother, cousin, sister, it doesn't matter, but I'm pushing you along to keep doing it because you're fueling my fire. You know, I'm riding your coattails around the world here, and you can't stop because then I stop, and then what the hell am I going to do? And that's the problem. People are predispositioned, and no matter how much they love you, no matter how much they care for you, deep down inside, people are greedy. People are selfish. I don't care who you are. I'm not saying that I don't love people. I don't care about people. Other musicians don't. Anybody on this podcast doesn't. But people are greedy. It's a rough world out there, and it's a rough society. And it's hard to deal with this stuff.
And people are nosy, as Ryan said. And can you imagine getting help when you're famous? So again, what do we do to society? We blow up the news. We blow up the media. We give them no privacy. As I said, I don't have this practice to the stars, but the people I've had that have been famous, you got to clear the whole office. Back before COVID, when you had a live office, it's a lot. You got to clear the office. They can't be in the waiting room like anybody.
Well, it's like HIPAA doesn't exist to a famous person.
Exactly.
It doesn't exist to them.
We're not respectful. But I want to say one thing. When you say, do people guide them into help? Not like if they have heart disease, not like if they have diabetes. I saw the interview with Kanye West and Jimmy Kimmel, and I think Kanye West did a great job to get people to come to treatment, to raise their awareness. Don't be ashamed. Break the stigma. It's just like if you had diabetes, you got a chronic illness, it's going to need ongoing care. Yeah. And let's get rid of the stigma. And I think he does a wonderful job of trying to, I don't know what everybody else thinks. I don't know what you think, John, but I think he does a great job of trying to get rid of that stigma on mental health services and treatment.
Yeah, no. One thing I want to say, and I see Richard and John are ready to go, but one thing I want to, oh, sorry, Richard. Richard's not ready to go. He was just leaning in to look at something. But one thing I want to say to kind of tie the bow on what we're saying about Kanye West, because I do agree with you on that, is that Kanye West, for as much as people don't like him or this and that, another thing that happened on the interview with David Letterman was he said something, and don't quote me, but it definitely was along these lines. He's saying to David, like, okay, I stopped taking my medication. And in the background, you hear, and he goes, why are we clapping? And I was like, yes. I was like, tell them, like, why are we clapping that, he stopped taking his medication? Like, are we saying, like, okay, you were able to stop taking your medication, you're good now, right? So I was really glad that he called out, whoever it was in the audience, like, why are we clapping? Like, if he decides to go back on medication, that's his choice. If he decides that he wants to take a break and maybe try something else, whether it be yoga or whatever the case, time with his family, right? Time by himself to write things down or create music, whatever the case may be, then that's fine. But yeah, like, I think that Kanye West has done a great job, like you said, of really, like, addressing mental health in the spotlight and in general, to be honest with you.
Well, I think that, you say go get help. Well, just look at the medical profession. You have traditional medical doctors, you have holistic doctors, you have chiropractic doctors, and they all have a different way of addressing problems. And some of those things work for some people. They don't work for everybody. When that person was clapping, maybe it's because they come from the perspective where there are people that have, like Dr. Andrew Weil, who's, a medical doctor, who says that, that there's a lot of the medications that actually make things worse, and they kind of keep the person on it, and they keep you from getting well. And, Sean, you were saying, the world is difficult. And I think what makes the world even more difficult is when we are looking for the world to be our source of love, a source of Are You a Cat? And then when we hear this deluge of hate because people are jealous of where we've been, or they just don't like us for whatever reason, then it becomes very difficult for us to be able to survive, because we aren't able to sustain ourselves. We aren't able to give ourselves that internal support. And
John, real quick, I'm sorry.
If I can just say, in my work, what I find is that it's learning how to, I help someone by being with them where they are, And when I can help them to break down their thinking so they can see what they're doing to cause pain in their life with their thinking. An example is, so we have an incident that happens to us. I'm rejected by a person. Well, that causes a certain amount of emotional pain. But there are other things that are causing emotional pain for me. One of them is what I think that person who rejected me is thinking about me. Another thing is what I think other people are thinking about me because this person rejected me. And then another is what I think about myself that this person rejected me. So 3 out of those 4 areas are things that are caused by me with my self-talk, and if I don't have that ability to give myself that internal support, then I'm going to be very vulnerable to needing external support, what other people think and do. And if I don't see what I'm doing to cause myself more pain, then I'm not going to be able to alleviate that pain. Because it's enough pain about the incident, but there's these other components that we oftentimes don't even address, because the person who's been rejected lumps all of that pain and blames it on the rejection. And they don't see the part that they're adding to it with their own thinking.
Right. And I'm sorry, what I wanted you to do, because I'm not sure if you did it here on the podcast yet, was did we explain what Are You a Cat is to everybody, just so they have an idea?
I mentioned it earlier, but it's respect, understanding, acceptance, caring, appreciation, and trust. 6 ways that we give love to ourselves and 6 ways that we give love to others. And the reason why I broke it down into that is because when you tell somebody to love themselves, it's just too big. Love, what? But when you say, well, you need to respect yourself, and respect is when you don't do something you don't want to do or allow someone else to do something to you that you don't want done to you. And then when you have an understanding of, what understanding is and acceptance, these are all ways that change your thinking into the positive direction to start bringing love into your life from myself to myself. See, and then I'm in control of that. And then I'm going to be able to give myself what I need. And like I've said, when I give that love to myself, it's like me cooking a meal that I'm providing the meat and potatoes. But when I'm getting that love from other people, they can only give me gravy. So if I'm not cooking the meat and potatoes, I can have all the gravy in the world, and it's still not going to be good enough. And I think a lot of the musicians, they got all this love from other people, but they don't have that love from themselves to themselves. And a lot of times it comes from childhood. I was just listening on NPR about something with Ricky Lee Jones, and found out that, she had a very difficult childhood growing up, and if we don't get that external support from our parents or our grandparents, and we aren't taught how to give it to ourselves, we're going to have a very difficult life.
Right. So real quick, I just want to, Mom, I'm going to kick this one to you real quick. We have Marla B, and she commented here on our YouTube stream, and she says, how do you help the person with mental illness see that there is a way out? If they are depressed, they might not be able to hear you. They do not see things the same way a healthy person does. So I'd like to give some input on this, but Mom, I'm going to kick it to you first, and let's see what you have to say.
One of the things that goes wrong is that we try to talk people into treatment. And like John was saying, we lose our respect for their opinions. So you have to join them where they are, understand how they feel. It's kind of counterintuitive. Don't challenge them. Say, I get it. I understand how you feel. But did you ever consider this? What happens with families and loved ones is they become very pushy. They become angry, hostile, and controlling. And that's just going to drive and spike the anxiety and depression. And it's not going to happen in one sitting. It's going to take some time. You can also try an intervention, bring in other family members. But please, when you're talking to someone and trying to be helpful to get them to go to treatment, please be respectful of where they are. And ultimately, it's got to be their choice. I was thinking the whole time you were talking about Corey Monteith and how they put him in rehab, and he came out. I think he was 9 months out of rehab and shot, I think, heroin again and died. And then do we say the treatment fails, or do we say that was his choice? He made a choice to do that. We gave him help, and he still made the choice. So you have to be respectful. You're not going to control this. Everybody's got some free will and destiny. and try to do the softer approach, not the strong arming somebody into treatment, and give them options. Like John was saying, give them options. Maybe they don't want medicine. Maybe they want this new integrative psychiatry, holistic psychiatry. Those tend to be the better ways to get somebody to get into treatment.
John, you have anything you want to say to it?
Yeah, well, one of the emotions that we have trouble identifying as people a lot of times is fear. And I'm not talking about physical safety fear. There's the fear of losing something that I have, or the fear of not getting something I desire. And what I found is that when I have something I'm fearful of losing or not getting, and instead of addressing that fear by giving "Are You a Cat" to myself, bringing love into my life, what we do is we turn it to anger that we direct at ourselves, and we beat ourselves up. So when I have fear that I turn to anger at myself, this is what I'm doing to cause my depression. And a lot of times we are contributing to that because of how we are reacting to a wound or trauma that we don't understand and we aren't able to process through. And so it's just real easy for us to beat ourselves up because we don't know what else to do with that emotional pain. So when I work with somebody and I help them to see what that pain is by being with them where they are, and then help them to see what they could do if they wanted to give themselves "Are You a Cat?" to alleviate that fear, or what's that wound that they've created a belief about themselves that they're not lovable, that they're not good enough, and then what they need to do to face that fear so that they're able to alleviate that. See, when a person is able to do those things, I find that that person is able to work through that situation because they're learning how to give themselves internal support to deal with the things that go on in life. And when you have internal support, and if you have some degree of external support, those are the people that are going to be more successful, according to Dr. Sandra Bloom, because she says, you can have two people going through basically the same things, and one of them is able to get through the process, and the other one gets taken down by it. And the variables that determine success or failure is the extent to which the person has external or the ability to give themselves internal support. When you got external and internal support, you're going to more likely get through that. But if you don't have external support and you can't give yourself that internal support, then you're going to be, pretty hard pressed and you may be taken down by it.
Great advice from both of you. Excellent.
I think this is a good time to bring up our Justin Bieber graphic.
Yes, here we go. So, Marla, I hope that helped. I'm going to bring the question down. And then we have here a graphic. It's a snip of an article that we found today. The timing is just coincidental, ladies and gentlemen, but check this out. And Richard, I'll leave you to it.
But I think it hits on everything that everyone's been saying. Yeah, I mean, the problem was so bad that the bodyguards, and the story goes on, like, this story should be, this happened once. Sorry, in my opinion, the story should be, this happened once, and then he went into treatment the next day. And, the article doesn't say that. It's on the regular during his tour. While he slept, they checked his pulse. And this is that idea. Like, I'm sure at the time this happened, he's one of the richest people in the country. He has what we think from just being fans. He's got everything he wants. And, all the issues that we've been talking about this entire time. Some people in his life that, our question of the day was, who's watching after our artists? And I don't think we meant it as checking their pulse while they were sleeping. That's I think it really speaks to everything we were saying. So.
Yeah, no. And then he's like one of the many examples of, somebody who started very young, right? And they were famous. It took off. Definitely not a one-hit wonder. And I guess in some cases, when you're that young, not being a one-hit wonder and going on to be successful could backfire, right? So real quick, I just want to kind of get everybody's thoughts here as we head towards the end of the show. And first of all, thank you, everybody who's been watching. And thank you to Sean and John and my mom, Dr. Joan Feinstein, who have helped me out with this podcast. Real quick, I was actually thinking, we're talking a lot about the negative side of musicians. And there's people who have been able to juggle the lifestyle very well and synchronize everything that's going on, their family life and their career and things of that nature. But when I think to myself, the few musicians that came to mind, it was like Jay-Z, Diddy, people like that. Do you all think, and I'm just going to give my thoughts and then see what you think about it. In my opinion, there are people who thoroughly enjoy working, creating different streams of income, letting their creativity out in different ways. And then also maybe there are people that have just dealt with issues the correct way throughout their careers and their life. And they're just better off for it. So I will kick it to my co-host Richard here, and then we'll go around as we head towards the end. But what do you think, Richard, about the ones who are successful? I can't hear Richard. There we go. Sorry.
A true form of success is being able to hit the mute button. So I think that, I was going to say, what I was saying was I think that there are far and few between, and there's very few success stories that don't come with the down parts. And, and again, I mean, you really nailed it, whenever we said behind the music, because that's where every story is. Then I met my second wife and she grounded me. Or then when my baby was born, I found this purpose. And I think that's, those who get help and those who work through it, I think that's the key. But again, to stay with our theme of who or to be a nerd and bring over to comic books, who watches The Watchmen is the big part of the Watchmen movie and Watchmen comic up is like who watches over these superheroes, and the problem is, who's watching over these kids, because for the most part they're kids, even what Sean is speaking about, some of those guys that are still touring now, like, they were 18 and 19 when they started that van tour, and who's looking out for them. And again, not everyone can afford to have a person there who's watching out for you. But also, I can't imagine if you're about to play the sold-out Toronto Sky Dome and your psychiatrist goes, "Hey, they're not ready to go on tonight." Somebody's going, "All right, buddy, yeah, duly noted, thanks."
We got it, sure.
No problem. Yeah, they'll be fine. So, that's going to be the thing until we prioritize, and we, the fans, are often just as responsible for this because, we demonize people. I was talking with Shanna earlier today, and I was like, it's amazing that if we talk about the Chris Cornell, Lane Staley, like Shanna herself, or certain people will be like, "Oh, I sympathize for them." Oh, hey, how about Juice WRLD and Little Nas or in DMX. Oh, like we have different reactions. Like the sympathy is not there sometimes for if we're not really into that music genre. And that shouldn't be, it's one of, I think, the staples of this podcast is, we want to see it from every perspective. And a person in pain doesn't matter if we don't like their music. So that's my end thoughts.
Yeah, excellent. Sean, what do you think?
Well, I just wanted to touch real quick on a success story.
Yeah.
That I know of in the music business that just popped into my head, which is my favorite band forever that my brother got me into many, many years ago. But Bad Religion formed in 1979, 1980, still a band today, still a touring band today, still releasing albums. Their singer, Greg Graffin, has wrote multiple successful books. He's a professor in marine biology, got his degree from Cornell University, teaches at UCLA, used to teach at UCLA. He's back to full-time in the band. This is a punk rock, anti-establishment guy. Yes, I know he used to drink. I don't know if he still does. I don't know enough about his background. He's raised kids. He's been married and divorced at least once, maybe twice. Not saying he's perfect, but he is a guy, maybe he's depressed. Who knows? But he's definitely a success story in all of this sadness and everything that, maybe he was surrounded by the right people.
Yeah.
Maybe he had the right upbringing. Who knows? Who knows what his perfect recipe was? Maybe he was just uber intelligent and knew the consequences that were facing him. Who knows? But obviously the guy's a genius. He's wrote books. He's wrote all sorts of books. Really admirable guy. And there is kind of silver linings in some of this that I'm sure there's other instances of that out there. And I know a couple others, but that just shows something. At 40 years in a touring punk rock band, multiple degrees, teaching at some of the most elite schools in the world. And, but who knows, maybe he was the one guy who had the right people looking out for him. Who knows?
Yeah, no, and it's awesome to see that he was able to do all of that. And, I'm not going to go in circles and start the podcast all over again, but, it also, like you said, he was a professor, he wrote some books, and I'm bringing it back to that creativity. Some people it pours out of them, right? In all different directions. They want to do 100 things. They're talking about what they want to do. They do it. I want to teach. I want to write books. I still want to write albums. I want to tour. I want to do the whole thing. But obviously he was able to harness the energy in a good manner. So that's awesome to hear. So, John, next up.
Well, you said, what about some of the people that seem to have gotten it together or made it? And I'd be willing to go out on a limb and bet that if you sat down and you talked to those people, like you were saying, P. Diddy, Jay-Z, they are people that have the ability to give themselves, to some extent, internal support as they're dealing with the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows of adulation, versus lack of adulation, and from the external world. And there's a book, Who Moved My Cheese, and when we grow up and we're learning how to be an artist and we create songs, it's not, you got to create another song and another song. And a few weeks ago when I was in my 20s, I used to write songs, and my best friend taught me guitar. He really loved guitar, and so I picked it up. And what I learned was that I had things to say, and I wrote these songs. But after a while, it was like I was coming up with similar tunes. It was like it was hard to come up with a different tune. Now, I was not a musician. I was just somebody who used a guitar to write songs. But I could see how limited it was to come up with something new and creative, that's going to get people like, the first successful album did, and things like that. And so when you start to find that you can't produce at that level because you've kind of, you're playing the same songs in your head, I can see how that would be really scary for people. And if they don't have the ability to give themselves internal support, then their external support is going to be drying up, which means there's less love and adoration, and then they're going to be in their fear and their darkness, and then we don't know what to do with that. We don't teach people what to do with their emotional pain enough. And I think that's where we need to start in our society and our families. But a lot of us have to learn ourselves first, because we didn't get it taught either. The things that I've learned have been self-taught. Because, my parents did the best that they could, but, in my dad's way was, well, don't think about it. If you get upset thinking about that broken heart that you have about somebody, don't think about them, and that's how he tried to cope with it. See, but that's what he came up with his, in his life. When he was 7, his father died, So the easiest thing as a 7-year-old is to try not to think about it as a way of trying to avoid that pain and hurt. The problem is we become an adult and we're still trying to not think about the things that have pain and hurt. And all that pain and hurt is accumulating in our life, and we're not addressing it. And it's just a bigger area that we don't have love in our life. And the real place it's missing from is from ourselves. Because as an adult, I can give it to myself. I have the mental ability to do that. As a child, I didn't have that. I was totally reliant on other people.
Some people, as adults, children that turned into adults, don't have it either, in my opinion, because they weren't given it and didn't develop it.
Yes, I agree.
As they went on in life, because they sometimes think of themselves still as that insecure kid.
Yes, that's
no matter what age
right.
they are.
That's the trauma. See, and they don't even realize that there is something that they can do, like that they can be their own source of love. They don't even realize that, because they think, the things that we come up with as a child is like getting angry. When we're 2, we learn how to get angry with people to make them do what we want. We learn at 6, I taught myself to numb out, when I was at a funeral of my uncle, or we distract ourselves or use addictions. And we do those things. And we think the reason my pain didn't go away is because I just didn't get angry enough, or I just didn't numb out enough, or distract myself enough, or use enough whatever I'm using as, and that I'm addicted to. And so we keep trying to do something that isn't working, thinking we got to do it more to make it work, when that's the very thing that's making it not work. And so I agree with you, Sean. It's a lot of people, when they're adults, still don't know what they can do differently.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's rough. And, Richard and I see this all the time without starting the podcast all over again. So after I make this comment, I will kick it to my mom. Going back to what both of you just said, you hit on a great topic. A lot of our musicians talk about their upbringing. They talk about the struggles that they faced, right? That the love that they didn't get, the love that they were striving for. We hear it in their lyrics all the time. So I can't even imagine when, you're talking about this, your words and thoughts got you famous. Now everybody loves you. Right. And as some of us know, especially, John and Mom, or Dr. Joan, I should say, sometimes when it can create relationship issues for everybody around you, when you didn't have that love and suddenly somebody loves you, you're like, whoa, like, what's going on here? Like, you know what I mean? It can be very confusing to people. So, Mom, I'm going to kick it to you. Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I think Sean and Richard nailed it when they said my favorite word, balance. When Sean was talking about Bad Religion, I thought, see, he was balanced. Music wasn't everything. He had other interests. And although he's not a musician, he's absolutely tops my list as my favorite actor. When Kimmel interviewed Tom Hanks, Kimmel went like this: how come you don't have gossip? How come you don't have problems with your wife? What's up with that? And Tom Hanks said, I'm not stupid. I don't delude myself. I don't think that because I'm a star or this or that, I don't think I can treat my wife badly. I'm not dumb. I realize I'm still a human being. And it goes back to what I said. What's the ideology? What's the belief system? I think we use Hollywood. We use stars, musicians for our own fantasies, right? We use them for our own releases. So I think we all have a collective responsibility to be more respectful, to be more caring, and watch it, because that fantasy that there's a perfect life, that the stars are something quote unquote special beyond the reality of life, we have to reel people in. That doesn't exist. Music's a temporary release from reality, but not a permanent release. There is no permanent release from reality. So that's my final thought.
No, that was some deep final thoughts too. Yeah, so we're going to bring it to a conclusion here tonight. So, Sean, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it, brother. John, thank you as always. Mom, Dr. Joan, thank you as always. Richard, anything? You good?
No, it's great. It's great to have a little different topic, to look a little more seriously at something.
Definitely.
And some great voices too. Not that your voice isn't fine, right? But
no, yeah. So I really appreciate everybody helping us out with this topic. Richard and I, we love talking about movies. We love talking about comic books. But Richard and I also text about the bigger things, if you will. So, like he said, I was happy to switch it up and use this platform, hopefully for some good and hopefully to give some people some understanding. So that's going to wrap it up for this podcast. Everybody watching, we greatly appreciate you tuning in and commenting. So as always, we have the YouTube channel. If you would like to follow us and subscribe there, the podcast is available on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on iHeartRadio, and on Podbean. Do me a favor, pay attention to this outro that we have going tonight. We are going to be, unfortunately, listing a number of artists who have lost their battle with mental illness or addiction. And at the end, we have a few numbers for everybody to call and pass on if they're in a darker place and need some help. So thanks to everybody listening. Thanks to my guests here. We'll talk to everybody soon, okay? Have a good night, all right?
And thanks to you, Ryan, for being the host that you are.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I love doing this with all of you. All right. Thanks, everybody. Tune in to this ending. We'll see you next time. Take care.